audibly and/or visually recording the meeting. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair, there are no changes.
May I please have a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Councillor Partridge, Councillor Green, all in favour. Any declarations of interest? I see none. May I please have a motion to approve the minutes of our October 23rd meeting of ECS as presented? Councillor Whitehead, Councillor Skelly, all in favour. Colleagues, 7.1 is a presentation respecting the Neighbourhood Action Strategy Annual Update 2017. We ask that the committee hold any questions for the 9 neighbourhood presenters until after they have all spoken. Vicky Woodcox, could you please make your introduction?
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased today to present along with the neighbourhoods, and really this is a session for the neighbourhoods to tell their stories and their successes and possibly challenges that they've experienced over the past year. As you may recall, the whole Neighbourhood Action Strategy started in 2011 under Chris Murray's leadership in partnership with the Hamilton Community Foundation. And the community educators were a key component of working with the neighbourhoods as well, and were supported through the Social Planning Research Council. So this is all about engaging residents and communities to have some input and say to help improve the health and quality of their lives. And I think you're going to see through these presentations that there's been some great strides made, not without some challenges, but that's what you would expect with this kind of a process. So I think just how we've planned this is that we're going to start with, there will be 10 neighbourhood reps presenting, and then following that we do have 2 speakers just to talk about the evaluation of the neighbourhoods over the past year. And then the other thing that's happened, because we've reached that 5-year mark, we've done a whole review of the neighbourhoods, and we've finished the first phase, and we're now working towards phase 2, which is what is this new model going to look at. The plan is by Q2 2018, we'll come back with that full plan and the appropriate sort of direction and resources that may be needed. So I think then, without any further ado, I'd just like to announce the first speaker, and that's going to be David and Isabella from Davis Creek.
Welcome. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairperson, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for welcoming us here today. However, before I continue, I'd like to turn this podium over to my daughter for a moment.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairperson, councillors, and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Isabella, and I'm a member of the youth group of the Davis Creek Community Planning Team. Over the last 5 years that I've been involved, we've done many events, one of which was the LGBTQ dance that we held a couple years ago. We had a great turnout, and there were many kids and teenagers that felt welcome and had a great time. We've also had various community cleanup days, and we've always had quite a few residents show up and help out. That in all creates a good, positive, and safe environment. Another event that we've had is the Easter egg hunt. Again, we've always had good turnouts, and all of the kids love to come out and participate. 5 years ago, I used to hunt for eggs and participate that way. Now, I still have fun and I participate, just in a different way. I help set up and volunteer to make it more fun and better than the previous years. Being in the Davis Creek Community Planning Team has helped me develop as a person to want to be involved and help. I can see the change in the community as more people volunteer and join the team, especially the large group of people that have joined and formed the youth group that I myself am a part of. Thank you.
So I myself have been involved with the Davis Creek Community Planning Team now for about 6 years, virtually since the beginning. And over that time, I've had the opportunity to be the team's chairperson, and I've watched our membership slowly but steadily increase. I've enjoyed being a part of many events that we've held over these years, and the frequency and diverse nature of these events and projects have also increased. Our youth group was especially active this past summer, running weekly movie nights, getting our newsletter up and running as well. I'm proud of the group of people we have around our table and the mutual respect and cooperation I find at our table. Although we've had challenges with sourcing resources at times, but more importantly, we've had opportunities, networking with other communities at various events, attending the NLI, and various interactions with community members at our events as well. It was actually quite difficult to condense everything I want to say on this next part. I've had the opportunity recently to be involved with one of the reimagined community discussions, and I look forward to the continued forward movement of the NAS, as I'm sure it can be quite challenging to continue shaping things and determining the next steps. Although I'm sure that there is no one here, I think that there are some who still do not grasp the full value of doing this community stuff, or how to determine if it's worth investing in, or how much do we invest, or what is really being achieved. Is it just some feel-good stuff that we're doing, or are we building capacity in our communities? I'm sure there are some studies somewhere that show that some sort of correlation between community engagement and reduced 911 calls or police involvement or gang activity, maybe even further stats to demonstrate higher graduation rates from the better neighborhoods, which can be achieved through community involvement and engagement. Is it building capacity in the community? And maybe, or perhaps, it's simply providing opportunities for those to simply exercise the better parts of themselves that they would otherwise wouldn't have a chance to. And so perhaps not building capacity, but utilizing and becoming aware of the potential in our communities. How does one measure a smile, a laugh, or a happy memory from a community event, an activity, or a project? A memory that a child has that helps a child reflect in later years to say that they had a happy childhood, and obviously the ripple effect that that can have. And equally, the smile or good feelings a community member has when they put on the event, because they see value in their actions and skills for putting on that event by the way the reactions of those around them at attending. I realize it's important to show and state our successes, maybe show the stats of attendees to the events. And by the way, we had somewhere around 100 people on each of our nightly movies every Thursday through the summer. However, instead of having a big PowerPoint about it, or showing stats or even pictures from the event, I thought I'd simply bring my daughter here for you to hear from. And so, on behalf of Davis Creek Community Planning Team, I would like to extend our thanks for all the various support through the numerous service providers, the SPRC, Hamilton Community Foundation, the City of Hamilton, as well as our Councillor Chad Collins, not only for his support of the events, but for attending and engaging in our meetings regularly. Thank you.
Now, Vicki, are you going to introduce the remainder, or?
Of course, thank you, sir. Okay, so I would like to introduce Ryan, and Ryan Elliott is from Ralston.
Welcome, Ryan. The floor is yours, sir.
Okay. So my name's Ryan. I'm a co-chair from the Ralston neighborhood. I've been involved since it got founded a couple of years ago. So members of council, thank you for the opportunity to provide some insight into what the Ralston planning team has been up to in the past year. It's been a year of change and progress for us. Some of the successes we've had this year have been significant to our community. We've received funding via the Healthy Kids Community Challenge to provide some new features to Captain Cornelius Park, our city's only urban forest. We'll be adding water lines to assist with community gardens, as well as for a drinking fountain, and an opportunity to build an ice rink in the winter. We're going to see the removal of invasive vegetation, enhancing natural features, and our first accessible park through a forest. We've also had a great opportunity to partner with nearby Mohawk College. We've engaged with the college and the students pursuing a transportation diploma for traffic assessment in our neighborhood. Through the hard work of the students, we found many of the complaints echoed by residents were confirmed by the assessment. Prior to the survey, thanks to our counselor, we had radar speed signs installed near roads frequently identified by residents as concerns. The neighborhood planning team has also been successful in the creation of a regular newsletter highlighting important neighborhood issues, current events, activities, and even recipes. They have been a welcome addition to our mailboxes and front doors. Another positive that we found is that what we feel is a natural meeting place in the neighbor-to-neighbor community food center, and we've seen steady and regular attendance at our meetings. The large welcoming space, coupled with good food, as well as being strategically placed in our neighborhood, have helped us to create a sense of place with our meetings. A Little Lending Library is another project that the Ralston planning team welcomed to our neighborhood. A resident led an initiative to build, install, and stock a Little Lending Library on the premises of Westmount Rec Center, and it's been a great success. It was even covered in the Mountain News. We've also continued a tradition of hosting a movie night. While the weather was not agreeable this year for an outdoor event, we were able to make use of the space nearby, and we had a well-attended event after all. We have not been without our challenges this year either. We've had a hard time with filling some positions within our executive, leading to having to waive one of our terms of reference on our leadership team. We've also struggled with attracting and retaining diverse voices and opinions at our meetings. We've also had to park some goals due to limitation of interest in chairing a subcommittee to see it through. Some opportunities on the horizon for us are chances to partner with neighborhood stakeholders, such as the Westmount Rec Center, schools, and community groups like Neighbor to Neighbor for our future events. Thank you again for the opportunity to share what the Ralston planning team has been up to.
Thanks, Ryan.
I'm going to ask Jocelyn to introduce the next members. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Welcome.
So I'm going to be your new MC. So coming up next is John from the Sherman neighborhood.
Greetings and salutations, everyone, to members of City Council, to special consideration to Matthew Green right here, our councillor of Ward 3. Awesome, and Simon is also awesome as well. I will be brief, even though I'm long-winded usually. My experience with the Sherman Hub doesn't go back too far. I became a resident of the Sherman Hub about 5 years ago, and it took me about a year to start the ball rolling there. We've had some interesting times with the Sherman Hub. We had the dissolving of the support and planning teams earlier this year. We are coming up with what they call a resource planning team, and in doing so, we are adjusting our financials as well as adjusting a lot of our focus back to resident-led initiatives, which is what we're going to be talking about momentarily from the report of one of our fellow residents, Biliana. Just a quick note before we do that. We had, with the Neighbourhood Action Strategy team, a great relationship going through constant checking in and surveys, so we really want to appreciate the diligence of the team there. However, we wanted to talk about support teams and a lot of service providers taking away some of the steam of resident-led initiatives. We found that a lot of our hub meetings in the previous 2 years, we didn't have a lot of resident-led initiatives being brought up because our agendas were being filled up with a lot of the service providers. So we've done a new initiative, which a lot of other hubs were talking about, which is giving limited time to service providers on the agenda, with the exception to the rule if they have a resident-led person coming up to support and to team up with them. This way we can guarantee that we have a resident leading something along with the support and infrastructure that a service provider does take in. So without further ado, here's what Biliana, one of our residents, has to say as well for it. My experience with the Sherman only goes back to as early as 2016. So the limited words of the mural of Daniel's work, which Daniel was part of the Heritage Committee for us, looking at Lucy Day Park and so forth, here's what we have looking back over the past 5 years. Our neighborhood has changed in recent years, in some ways that are very noticeable to visitors, and in ways that are experienced mostly by long-time residents. Here are some notable successes. Safety. The installation of a flashing 40 speed zone around Adelaide Hoodless School and advocating for safer streets with lowered speed limits in the rest of the neighborhood. Wentworth was converted to two-way, and there is now stop signs, speed bumps, bump outs on many streets that are used as high-speed cut-throughs. There has been enthusiastically uptaking of lawn signs encouraging motorists to slow down and watch out for children. Parks. Major work has been done at parks at the opposite ends of the neighborhood. In the north, a dedicated group of volunteers adopted Lucy Day Park and hosts regular parties and seasonal family-friendly events in the park, including a corn roast in the late summer and Winterfest coming up in the winter. So, Lifesavers Park in the south has received a major makeover, including new playground equipment and equipment for outdoor movies. Neighborhood Yard Sale. An annual community-wide yard sale has been held in June. Residents who register their lawn sale have their location indicated on a map and provided with signage. This popular event has expanded and is now co-organized by other neighborhoods in the lower city. History. A former cotton milling factory at 270 Sherman North has been restored and now houses workspaces for artists and craftsmen, galleries and events. The stories about the neighborhood, both the people and the places, have been shared throughout historic walks, garden tours, and Jane's walks. The history of the neighborhood continues to be a draw for many new residents. Arts and entertainment and engagement. An exciting initiative brings together artists and residents to beautify public spaces. The alley that parallels to Lotridge Street has been used as a canvas to showcase First Nations history in the area. Professional artists and environmental groups, Green Venture, have worked with residents to decide on art to paint in alleyways, in private garages, and teaming up with children and youth to do the actual painting. An example of how residents have become involved in the Sherman Hub is offered by one of our meeting coordinators, Lita Bilioni. Our first meeting that I attended, everyone was nice and kind and friendly. We had a good team. We have been with the Hub for 3 years, me and my husband. Now I take notes and set up the room with Matt, our former community developer. We have always had fun too. So again, in closing, we would just like to invite you, any of you, to come down to the Sherman Hub meetings. They're the first Monday of every month at Tim Hortons Field. We want to bring not only the community together, but the city together in our community as well. Thank you for your time. See you soon.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, John. So now I'm going to call up the Riverdale team, Saif, Sherry, and Tanisha.
Good afternoon, councillors and everyone. My name is Saif Adari. I moved to Canada 7 years ago. I attended English language classes at St. Charles and Barraquay School. I became involved with planning team 3 years ago and encouraged my daughters to get involved. As a newcomer, it is a good experience for me. I learned how to work together with people from different religions and cultures. My participation with the planning team helped me to improve my English communication skills and also helped me to make friends. I promote the planning team to other newcomers and encourage to participate. Having a planning team in the Riverdale community is very important. It is teaching people of different religions and cultures to work together and learn from each other. Through the small program, I have started conversation coffee for newcomers, but finding space in the Riverdale community has been an ongoing challenge because recreation center is very small for the size of our community. It makes it very challenging to find space for different activities that we want to organize. Thank you for everything.
Good afternoon, everyone in councils. My name is Tanisha Rapino. I'm 12 years old and I live in Riverdale. My mom is sitting right over there. I help her in the Riverdale area. I also help her in the garden at Riverdale. I go to planning team meetings. I've been to 5 of them. I love to help at the garden, but I hate seeing the bugs. It's very fun. At the meetings, we talk about how we can help the community. We need to design a new playground so it's more safe for me and the children. We need to make it more bigger so more kids can play for the events like Fun Day, spring events, winter events, play day at the garden, movie nights, and game night. I just want kids to have fun and a big smile on their face at the end of the day.
I'm Sherry Evans. I'm with the Riverdale Planning Team. Tanisha is one of the few volunteers we have. Tanisha, like she said, is 12 years old. Tanisha doesn't participate so much as a child in the event. She's very much one of our volunteers in the events. She helps out with the popcorn machines or anything else we do. She helps set up. She helps clean up. She's one of our big volunteers in the group. Riverdale neighborhood, for those who don't know, is a very nationality diverse culture place. We have a lot of different nationalities, and our biggest thing that we've been working on is the inclusion of our nationalities, so that everybody works together, does things together, rather than having groups off in separate centers. We have we have the garden every year. This year we had the pleasure and honor of having Lake Avenue School grade 2-3, the 2-3 class, the grade 3 class, and the 3-4 class join us for the spring. They helped dig, they helped plant, they helped do all of it. I've never seen a bunch of excited children to come out. I had one class, we don't know why, but every time it was their turn, it rained. And they came out. I was there, sun or shine, and they were there. We have the absolute pleasure. Adam Watson came down with fruit trees for us. He was coming down to drop them off in the rain for me. I was planting. And this group of children came down in the rain, and Adam stayed for the whole time the kids were there. He taught them about the trees. He taught them about grafting the trees. He helped plant the trees. It was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen a group of kids do. They absolutely loved it. They came down we had one group come down in the fall. They actually got to reap some of the harvest. And I got in a little bit of trouble when I got back to the school later because the other kids didn't get to come down, but we'll work on that for next year. We've, what else have we done? We've had the spring event, like Tanisha mentioned. We had candy for the kids. We had wonderful donors who each child went home with a gift, some kind of toy, some kind of something. They went home with chocolate. We painted Easter eggs, so each of the families got 2 Easter eggs, and as a family, they got to paint them and do their activity. The winter event, they did gingerbread houses last year, so they got to put them together and take their gingerbread home. We had Santa come for the winter event, and he handed out hand-knitted mitts and scarves and hats for each of the groups, each of the kids. They also went home for toys at Christmas. The Easter Bunny came for Easter. We had a fun day this year down at the garden. We're trying to bring more people down to the garden. So we have a big grass area down there. We're trying to promote more of our activities down there. So we had a fun day down there with the youth group, and it was great. The kids, that's what our main focus is. Bring the kids in, bring the nationalities together, have a good time. I have to put out, especially since I have the chance to do it in person, thank you to Chad. We have a real issue in our neighborhood with people who thinking stop signs are not really there. And Chad has been amazing. He's gotten us signs saying slow down, this is your neighborhood, and that kind of thing. It has helped a lot. It's been a great help. It's out on so many people. I have people who actually come to my house. Where do I get a sign? So we've gotten some more. But yeah, the neighborhood, I've only been with it for a year and a half now, and it's amazing. It's so amazing to see the excitement in all of our neighbors coming out to do this stuff and work together. So thank you very much for allowing us to do this. And like Tanisha said, the only things we're working on now is we do need a bigger park. There's an awful lot of kids, and the bigger kids are growing up. So we kind of need something to get the bigger kids off the little kids' slides, that kind of thing. Our big things we're working on right now is bullying. That's an ongoing thing. And the traffic issues that we're having. But other than that, we're doing pretty good. Thank you.
Thanks to the Riverdale team. And now I invite Carl from Stinson to come up.
All right, well, thank you very much, councillors, for taking the time to listen to me. It's my pleasure, in my capacity as co-chair of the Stinson Community Association, to speak to you today. Over the past 5 years, the Stinson Community Association has seen great changes and challenges. Supported by a mix of new membership and long-term residents with incredible ongoing year-on-year passion, our community's core goal of bettering the Stinson community continues to grow. Our residents of Stinson have been empowered via the SCA with the support of the NAS and the Hamilton Community Foundation and our amazing community developers, private sector partners to engage with the local councillor and the City of Hamilton on projects, including the Carter Park revitalization, Central Memorial Rec Center improvements, Stinson bike lanes, the Wentworth pedestrian crossing, and community building-based initiatives. Over the past 5 years, members of the SCA have created the Stinzine as a local community publication. The Stinzine shares community stories, events, and information. Currently, the Stinzine is going through a rebirth and reimagining process. It has grown and continues to be a Stinson's local community publication. We host annual community events, developed to bring the community together. Examples of this are the Stinson Connects Barbecue, our highly successful songs from the Bishop Music Concerts. At these events, we host residents to food, entertainment, community information tables, and community planning activities at no charge. Over 5 years, Carter Park and Bishop Park have been adopted by SCA members. The Carter Park Shed got another painted makeover this year, including a chalkboard at the highly successful Where the Sidewalk Ends event, hosted by the Stinson Creative Labs Art in the Park series. Murals and art projects have been supported by the SCA and the City of Hamilton through the public art process and resident-led projects. Example of these are the excellent Carter Park mural, Slow Down Safety Snail in the process of being installed, and other ongoing projects. Residents of Stinson demonstrate a continued support for murals and art projects in our area. The SCA maintains a website, Facebook page, and Twitter account to improve communication, promotion, and sharing of information. The website was recently updated from its original iteration to organize and share information more effectively across the community. This year, after years of interest, the Stinson Community Garden team has built a community garden with 12 accessible raised beds providing fresh produce to our neighborhood. With the help of a Canada 150 grant, a series of art displays and benches will be added to the community garden to integrate it as a public space for all. I cannot overemphasize, I should say, the value of the NAS, not just to the community, but to the City of Hamilton at large. As a group of committed volunteers, we are able to provide massive value-added return on very small investments. We clean parks, graffiti, paint murals, clean alleyways, organize and spread information about city programs and offerings. The SCA runs events, empowers our residents, and provides a direct avenue to provide resident input on the ongoing projects affecting our neighborhood. With the support of the NAS and the community developers, we hope to continue the amazing work already being done in tackling the future challenges. With Council's continued support of the NAS in Stinson, we hope to collectively tackle issues related to gentrification, rental displacement, poverty, and expanding our membership to be inclusive of the diversity of all residents. Thank you again for your continued support of the NAS.
Thank you, Carl. That was quick. Now I'd like to invite the Keith neighborhood up and have Steve Rowe.
No, I don't have a PowerPoint, just me. Good afternoon. Several years ago, I stood in front of some of you as my fictitious grandfather, who just finished his last shift at the Studebaker plant. At the time, I talked about how great and vibrant my community was back then, but I also foretold that there was troubles ahead. But it wasn't all bad, because I knew that my and my coworkers' grandchildren were going to bring about a great renaissance in the neighborhood. Today, that renaissance is well underway. We've accomplished great things. Some of that was accomplished through our partnership with the NAS. However, some of it was accomplished despite that partnership. I'd love to go into a report on the great things that we've done. Maybe today's not the best time to do it. Anybody want to talk about that, come and see me. I'm always happy to brag about that. But you see, when the NAS started, it was conveyed to me as this great concept. The residents were going to be in the driver's seat to bring about change to their neighborhoods. Somewhere along the lines, that seems to have changed. We fell back in the same old ways of doing things that have served us for 50 years. It was that experts in community development were the only ones who could accomplish this change. Well, the reality is that Hamilton has 180 different and unique neighborhoods. Each one of those unique neighborhoods has their own strengths and challenges. So to think that anyone but those residents of those neighborhoods is the expert in dealing with those strengths and challenges seems to be a little misguided. The NAS that I originally got on board with always kept that premise in mind, and working on an individual neighborhood level was the most important thing. However, over time, things have moved away from that and have even further diluted the resources that we've had to pull from. Throwing extra citywide initiatives into a system that was set up to support individual neighborhoods and drawing the NAS staff support in more directions every day makes it a lot more difficult for the residents to do the work that we have to do. That's not to say that the Experience Annex and Snow Angels and all the other great city initiatives are not worthwhile endeavors. It only says that the individual neighborhood support has suffered. I know that I've only spoken about the negatives, and that's by no means to say that the NAS does not contribute to our efforts. They do in a very great way. The NAS has started to move back to the premise that each of the NAS neighborhoods is unique and therefore needs a unique set of efforts. Some of the neighborhoods need a more hands-on assistance than others. That's great. All that does is it speaks more towards the uniqueness. Some of them are more ready to move on and get out of the way and allow for other neighborhoods to get involved. A friend of mine posted a quote by R. Buckminster Fuller this morning, and I think it really applies to our work. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the old model obsolete. And I think the NAS is a very big part of that new model. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Steve. And now I invite the team from McQuestion to come up, Amy, Carly, and Angus.
You can come closer. Okay. Good afternoon, Council. My name is Amy Bonin, and I'm a resident, volunteer, and employee of McQuestion Urban Farm. McQuestion Urban Farm is a living dream in the east end of Hamilton. This area, as I'm sure you know, is deemed a food desert. You couldn't find a grocery store within 2 kilometers of the neighborhood. The McQuestion community members came together and created the vision of turning this food desert into a food oasis. We are home to a diverse community of all incomes, backgrounds, and talents. Our organic farm has been in operation for over 2 years, but the actual vision was formed 8 years ago from community member Pat Reed. With help from our Ward 4 City Councillor Sam Marula, the City of Hamilton, the SPRC, the Hamilton Community Foundation, McQuestion Urban Farm was created with its roots firmly in place. Under the guidance of organic farmer Alvaro Venturelli, owner of Plan B Organic Farms, the vision was simple: grow affordable organic food and create jobs and skills for neighbors. And we've accomplished many of these goals. Presently, we are home to Sprout Camp, a farm camp for kids. We offer educational farm programs to elementary schools in Hamilton. Over the summer, we had 3 weekly markets, weekly good food boxes, and currently we have 5 resident employees, and we offer countless volunteer opportunities to anyone willing to help. So that's anyone. Over 3 years ago, my husband and I bought our house based on a recommendation from a city employee, Jesse Williamson, who suggested we investigate the neighborhood as he thought it'd be a natural fit to our lifestyle. I've always been interested in gardening, cooking, and community. I joined the planning team on a whim. I wanted to see what this community center was all about. By the first meeting, I came on as the planning team secretary and the official newsletter editor of the McQuestion Connection. My journey to learn more about this community expanded when I met several passionate and influential members that volunteered at the center. I too started to volunteer and even went on to planning our Communities Canada 150, and we had over 300 participants. Eventually, I found myself in need of a job, and I really wanted to work in the community. Through the McQuestion Urban Farm, the City of Hamilton, and Plan B Organic Farms, I was offered the job as a market staff for our farm's Saturday market, where we sell affordable, organic, nutritious food to our community from May to November. Soon after, an additional grant-funded contract was offered to me to be the farm's social media coordinator, which I took instantly. Then another contract came up for a community engagement person, and I gleefully accepted. Though these were small 6 to 8 week contracts, I was willing to take any employment on the farm where my passion lies, and this paid off. Fast forward to the present, my current contract, and easily the most challenging and exciting job I've ever had, I'm now employed as a farm assistant in labor. I'm a farmer. Every day we get to experiment and practice growing as farmers, peoples, and community. I love working at the farm, being outside, and the opportunity to contribute to my community through growing food. Food is love, and love is food. With this current community project, we are nourishing our neighbors and harvesting our unique skills and talents to work towards our common goals: sustainability, feeding our community, and farming in the city. Thank you very much.
Truth be told, my own curiosity led me on a 3-year and 11-month trip finding out how I can help the city myself. My name is Angus McIntyre, and I am the one and only founding member of the McQuestion Youth Opportunities Creators, or MYSC for short, or MYOC if you prefer. We believe in the absolute strengths, ideas, and creativity of youth. We believe in creating recreation, job, and volunteer opportunities for youth using these unique talents that only youth seem to be capable of. We believe in respecting them and everybody else. We care immensely for everybody involved and everybody in general. We are committed to our mission that we've created for ourselves in order to help people out. That's only four of the values. I forget what the next one is. Oh yeah, you also like to have fun as well. Carly, our youth connector, would you like to tell us how you've been involved in the MYC and the experiences you've had?
Of course. Hi, so I'm Carly. I'm McQuestion Youth Opportunity Creator's first ever Youth Connector. That's pretty awesome to say. I've only been working for 2 months, and it still is amazing to say that I'm the Youth Connector. So I grew up in McQuestion. I was a graduate from St. Helens School, and I was also a graduate from Churchill. Growing up in McQuestion, I was always told that my neighborhood was pretty scary, and that we shouldn't really be around, we shouldn't be outside, and that it was not a nice place to live in. I found this kind of troubling, and I know that when I graduated high school, I decided to move away. When I came back to Hamilton, I felt kind of out of place. I didn't really have a place to go, and I found that I was having trouble going to school. Being someone who identifies with a mental illness and not having a community is often pretty hard. I know that even if you don't have a mental illness, it is hard not to have a community. I had trouble figuring out what I wanted to do for my career and what I wanted to do in my community. Sorry, I'm saying a lot. And what I enjoyed about Mohawk College the most when I went there was being part of college communities and starting clubs. So I did a lot of that while I was there, and then I also found my placement where I was able to work with youth to help develop their communities and help. We did it through public health, help with tobacco initiatives. And then after that, through public health, I found MYOC. And it was pretty interesting to find MYOC because I was already a resident of McQuestion, and I wasn't expecting for my career path to take me right back to McQuestion. So when I went out to MYOC for the first time, I saw a lot of passionate youth looking to figure out what they wanted to do with their lives, and I saw myself in that. So it was very nice to be able to offer some help and support, doing something I enjoyed by helping them find out who they were. I believe that feeling part of a community and having a place to belong overall improves everyone's well-being, including myself, mental illness or not. I couldn't figure out, I said that already. When I finished my placement and graduated, I continued volunteering with MYOC for 2 years. And then we learned about the Youth Opportunities Fund, which is a grant offered by the Trillium Foundation. And we decided to try and write a grant proposal for the grant. We were successful, so we were able to hire someone full-time, a youth connector, to work with MYOC and help develop youth and help develop the opportunities in our neighborhood. I was a long-standing volunteer, and I ended up volunteering more than I was working at times. I liked my job, but I also really liked to volunteer, so it was hard to do both at the same time. As youth, we stood together and we decided that we wanted to hire one of our youth to be the youth connector. So we had a really youth-led initiative where we decided that we would work together to hire someone from our team. And because I had the background already, we decided to hire me, so we voted, and I'm now the youth connector. I think that it's really cool that we were able to use something that the NIS believes in, which is residence-led, and we used a youth-led model to hire our youth connector. And it'll be nice to be able to continue to help develop MYOC and its participants through mental health support groups, LGBTQ subgroups, capacity building initiatives, volunteer opportunities, and most of all, utilizing and growing all of our youth members' unique talents with our very first youth connector. That's all. We also have a gift. We also brought folders for each counselor from MYOC. So these are for everyone. We'll leave them here. And we also have a shirt for Councillor Green and Councillor Sam Marula, because we're also going to be expanding into Keith to continue our work. So we have these here too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to the McQuestion team. And now I'm happy to invite both Cynthia and Nancy to come up and talk about Crown Point.
That was a tough act to follow. We have T-shirts for sale.
Welcome. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Yeah. So, greetings, members of council, city staff, guests, and neighbors. We'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you about the great things that have been happening in Crown Point through the Crown Point planning team. We're going to be sharing some of our successes as well as a few of the challenges we've encountered. So my name is Cynthia Locker. I've lived in what we call now Crown Point since 2001, and have been a member of the planning team for much of the time from its inception. So I'm currently the co-treasurer and publisher of The Point. The wonderful thing about the planning team has really been that it's allowed me to engage with my neighbors in a way that I wouldn't normally. I mean, when I had little kids, it was great. We'd all, meet in the playground. But this way, I'm meeting a broader number of people from my community, and we often have very similar sort of values. Some of those values that we bring to the planning team is sort of the asset-based community development, but also embracing resident-led initiatives. And we appreciate the support of the Neighbourhood Action Strategy. And as you can see from our map, we straddle wards 3 and 4, and so our councillors, Matthew Green and Sam Marilla, have been great supporters as well. So with collaboration with the city and the Neighbourhood Action Strategy, the service providers in our neighbourhood, and most especially our neighbours, we've been able to implement some really great changes that enhance our neighbourhood. For one thing, we have The Point, which is our newspaper, and we're heading into our 5th year, and this is our communication tool from the planning team to let the greater community know what's going on in our neighborhood. And it's really very well received, and it's a labor of love for about 40 of us who put that together every 2 months. This past year, we've been developing a new action plan to guide the work that we're going to be doing for the next year, and then we're also developing a plan to keep that updated as the years go on, since it is very much a living document based on who's at the table and what the residents bring and want to see accomplished in our neighborhood. This has been created with the help of staff at the NAS, as well as getting a lot of feedback from the broader community. You can see from our map up on the screen, we've adopted a little part of the neighborhood in Industrial Sector C to expand our neighborhood with a slightly orphaned group. And from that, we've got a new co-chair who's sitting up in the rafters there. So it was strategic on our part. Members of our team are involved in the development of the Right on Target into a community space, and that's pretty exciting. And we've got a traffic calming action team where we've been getting information from everybody in the neighborhood about where traffic really needs to be safer for our community. The whole stop sign, it sounds like it's a universal problem. So we're certainly working towards that and working with our councillors on that. So two of the challenges that I'm going to highlight, and then Nancy will chat a bit about some others. Our first is the lack of community space. We, especially with we don't have the Y anymore, we don't have a home. So we end up moving from place to place, trying to find the best fit where we're accessible, where we've got childcare space for our meetings. I often get emails from The Point saying, so where's your office? And well, it's my pajamas on a Sunday morning. So that's certainly something that we would really love to be able to solve, so that we have a home, a place for the community to gather, to celebrate. Another one of our challenges has been the turnover in our community developers. The community developers are amazing, and they're a huge asset that really allow us to connect with the services in the community as well as with the city. We're really pleased to be involved in the reimagining process of the Neighbourhood Action Strategy, and we're really interested to see what that's going to look like in the future. I'm going to hand it over to Nancy.
Thank you, Cynthia. Good afternoon. My name is Nancy Reyes, and I came to Canada from the longest country in the world, named Chile in 1987 as a refugee. I arrived in Kitchener and left the city 20 years ago and have made Hamilton my home since. I have been here where I formed a family and my volunteer work began. I am very proud to be a Crown Point resident. This past 4 years, I have served as a co-treasurer and now a co-chair. I have bear witness to the impact community organizing has had in our neighborhoods. Give us autonomy, resources, and support to a group of very creative people, like Crown Point, and organically things are going to happen. As Cynthia mentioned, some of the projects that we complete and we reinvent and has been the Delight Festival, where 1 year was an array of lanterns by the pipeline trail as well. We also have had this change into a cascade of blue bottles. I don't know if anybody had the chance to go. The pipeline trail collaboration across city departments, resident engagement on the master plan has been we're very proud of that project. It started very small and eventually it has come together. Another great success project that we have had is beautifying efforts throughout our neighborhood. This past year, we did the DePave in Cannonworth and Cannon. And again, we continue to build collaborations with businesses such as Green Venture. Our garden club, it's another dear to our heart because from that we had the creator of the Monarch Awards. City School by Mohawk has chosen our neighborhood to be launching their mobile classroom, and they have begun their course delivery. My Free Hamilton. And we continue, like as I said, we continue to build relationship with the broader community. At the same time, we face challenges, right? You always have the one side, the yin and the yang, I suppose. But this does not deflate us. On the contrary, we try to learn from this. And we have issues with retention. We have issues with succession planning. We want to bring new people. And notably, one of the issues we have had is with youth. So it'd be great to connect with the youth connectors, yes. And also having all the residents in our community be represented. Our visible minorities, indigenous people, it's been a challenge. For the time being, our focus prevails on having a group where no idea is a bad idea. For this, without a doubt, make better neighborhoods. Our projects are leading initiatives done by residents in hopes that there's a ripple effect throughout our ever-growing city. So Crown Point is where the people are the point. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the Crown Point team. And now I'm happy to invite Autumn from Beasley.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today to speak with you again. I've made a little bit of a nuisance of myself over the past year, I think. So I appreciate you sitting to listen to me again. Today, I feel a little bad about going after Carl because I feel like his thing was a game changer because he had so many details and such a great presentation. But I wanted to focus more on my experiences with the Neighbourhood Action Strategy through the Beasley Neighbourhood Association. And I wanted to focus, I guess, more on the effect that that's sort of had on one person and the kind of ripple effect that can come out from one person's activities within a group like that. So I I moved into Beasley last September. Just before that, I had basically been questionably evicted from a place that I was living before, I think because I'm transgender. And I was having a really hard time finding a place to live. I looked all over the city, and most people wouldn't even show me their accommodations because I was trans. And other people, as soon as they saw me, just I couldn't find a place to live. So it turned out that I only had one possible place to move into, and that was the apartment I moved into in Beasley, which was a very troubling experience for me. I've never experienced that sort of thing before. So I was feeling at that point very alienated from Hamilton generally, from my community. And, you know, I didn't really have very much confidence about going out and engaging in my new community because I sort of remembered some things that happened to me in that area when I was younger and things like that. But I have some friends that live in the neighborhood, and they wouldn't let me sort of turtle into my new existence. And so, and I want to give a shout out to Matt Thompson, who's here, and really kind of encouraged me to sort of get involved. One of the first things he did was invite me to talk to Sherman Hub, who were having discussions about inclusion. And I went there and did that and found that a great experience. I started attending meetings at the Beasley Neighbourhood Association. At the time, I was working on a few projects of my own. I had been asked to take over a trans peer support group, and we had no funding. The funding for it had dried up. And so I decided to start a new group, and I applied through the small grants program to get funding so that we could have food and transportation money and stuff like that. And I found that the people at the Beasley Neighbourhood Association really helped me to accomplish that with, first of all, letting me know about the grant, and then also walking me through how to apply for it. And then also, like, there were a few kinds of other sort of difficulties associated with, like, you know, we wanted to meet at the Beasley Community Center, and so in order to do that, we had to have insurance, and I didn't know how to get insurance and all of that. And so the Beasley Neighbourhood Association took on my group as a project within the inclusion element of their of the Neighbourhood Action Strategy approach that they were taking. And I was very moved by that. Specifically, in terms of my group, what I was really concerned with was finding ways to get trans people to feel more integrated into their communities and feel more comfortable about applying for jobs, going shopping, doing the myriad of daily activities that we all do without feeling as though they were going to be treated differently or attacked or looked down upon. And the thing that I found about the Beasley Neighbourhood Association, which I admired and was so happy to find, was that they had this idea of integration, but they had extended it, of course, not only to transgender people, but also to the different groups of people that lived in our neighborhood. For instance, the Somalian community, which is a big part of the Beasley neighborhood, and other types of identity groups as well. And so I really took to getting involved with the planning team at the Beasley Neighbourhood Association. And it felt great to me in a couple ways, because I think one of the best ways that you can build a sense of belonging and a sense of integration is by having people from different backgrounds be present at meetings like, you know, association meetings and stuff like that, and having people sort of see that, you know, there's some of the same concerns as everyone else. Another thing that came out of my association with the Beasley Neighbourhood Association is that I was made aware of the Neighborhood Leadership Institute, and I applied to be a part of that and to learn a little bit about how to engage in leadership in the community and how to start new projects. And I have taken I took that course earlier in the year, and I have taken what I learned there and applied it to all of my projects that I'm involved in, both in Beasley and across the city. One of the things that I wanted to highlight, one of the favorite things that I sort of was able to volunteer at early on was the Hoops project, which took place down in Beasley, and so I got to just volunteer handing out hot dogs and things like that. But I really enjoyed it because I really enjoyed seeing the different kinds of people, and people of every shape and color and orientation were there, and I really felt like that was a great welcome to the community. We've done a number of things at the Beasley Neighbourhood Association that I think we're quite proud of. One of the big things we did earlier this year was to engage in a discussion about the sort of people that we want to have in Beasley. And what I mean by that is, of course, with some of the gentrification that's going on across the city and very strongly in Beasley, there's been a push to create certain kinds of accommodation for certain kinds of people, and we felt that we were losing some of the diversity that we had. So we like to see a mix of different size families, large families, small families, single people, so on and so forth. And we felt that a lot of what was going on in local development was focusing a little too much on just bringing in very small or small families or single people who would be mostly commuters, and would take away from that diversity that we already felt existing in the city. So we actually got involved with a company that was trying to break larger apartments into smaller apartments, and I'm sure many of you were here when we were involved in that process. And I was especially thankful because our deliberations about what to do over that situation took place over many months, and originally we didn't even want to talk at all to the developer. And I was really grateful that when I made the suggestion that we talk to the developer and just find out what they wanted to do and sort of try to be reasonable, even though we disagreed very much, that the association took that suggestion to heart, and that made me really feel like they were actually listening to everybody rather than just going with decisions they had made in the past and keeping to them. So that's a very important thing for us. Another very important thing for us that happened this year is the renaming of Simone Hall. We just call the old Beasley Community Center. We renamed it Simone Hall after Bill Simone, who's worked in the Beasley community for quite a long time. We're very proud of him, very happy to have him as part of our community. So those are the main things that I wanted to talk about. So thanks very much for your attention. I know it's been a long presentation from a lot of different people, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks. There's a great picture of the Hoops program on page 2 of the thingy here. Yeah, I was told to show you that.
Thanks so much, Autumn. And last but not least, I'd like to invite our team from Gala. Please come up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brenda Duke. I am the co-chair of the Gibson and Lansdale Area Planning Team. And I'd like to introduce Pat Poor, who is learning trial by fire here tonight. When we looked for someone to speak on behalf of Gala, we chose Laura Farr, and because she's been with Gala almost since the beginning. And I think Connor decided that tonight was not a night for a meeting, so I'm going to step in, and I'd like to read her speech from this. I'm not texting. I'm
just going to stand here and be supportive.
Yeah, good, thank you. I need it. So I'm going to read the speech that Laura wrote because it speaks to what Gala is. So, except the part about knowing Connor. I know Connor owes me a hug now. So, as I said, Laura's been with Gala since she was on maternity leave, and Connor's 5, I believe, now. And in her words, she had been previously involved with the Strathcona Community Council, and I strongly believe that when we connect our communities to our communities and do something, anything, to make a place more connected and vibrant, the outcomes are better for everyone. Research into social determinants of health bear this out. Engaged people tend to promote the positives, perhaps because in becoming engaged, they are able to feel more ownership and stewardship towards their city. It's a simple thing to sit back and complain. In fact, it is the easiest thing to do, but those people will seldom see their complaints resolved. When people come together and build those links between themselves, they build community, which then ripples outwards. The YMCA has a simple saying, strong kids build strong families, which builds strong communities. See, I'm going to do it again. The concept is simple, but it is staggering to see in action. More people become involved as more positive things happen around them. Again, a simple cycle with an enormous impact. This authentic action within communities is often the best organized and loudest voice municipal politicians hear, and therefore help direct political will. A city, after all, is not able to make those decisions for its constituents without knowing what they want. I could not believe the difference community planning team that focused on the strengths we had as people and how we build capacity in others would be coupled with the partnerships of Hamilton Community Foundation, Best Start Network, Social Planning and Research Council, and of course, the Neighbourhood Action Strategies. Along the way, there have been many other community partners who have joined us. Gibson and Lansdale, as you may know, is really where the white settlement of our city began. Richard Beasley, Robert Land, Charles Depew, and George Stewart are said to have settled here around 1782. With files from the head of the Lake Society, Robert Land was a loyalist who was well established when the Revolution broke out in Pennsylvania. After the war for his service to the Crown, he received a loyalist grant of 200 acres within earshot of Niagara Falls. The noise disturbed him, and he moved to a slight rise of ground on what is now the south side of Barton Street between Leaming and Smith, roughly where Laura lives today. In 1794, he applied for a grant of land, and by a deed dated 1802, was allowed 312 acres stretching from the mountain to the bay and from Emerald to Wentworth Street. By the time Hamilton became Hamilton, from the mountain to King Street, James to Wellington Street, the neighbors of the lands were the Beasleys, Fergusons, Springers, and the Aikmans, names that many will still recognize today. John Morrison Gibson was a lawyer and later MPP, known for getting the Prevention of Cruelty to Children Act in Ontario passed in 1893. Remembering our history while looking forward to the future is something that's important to us in Gala. We have many historical sites such as the Forum, Westinghouse, Smiley's Castle, and Woodlands Park, to name a few. Laura is the editor and publisher of Gala's largest success, The Herald. We are a financially sustainable bi-monthly newspaper. and we are financed completely by ad sales. And as our friend Peter Orman says, who doesn't want to hear good news? Our hubs are often information conduits for city services, community partners, and other levels of government. And I'm going to paraphrase here. Gala has been the subject of many surveys and test runs for departments. We're a smaller hub. We're roughly 6,000 to 7,000 people, and I figure they want to come in and see what the new kids on the block can tell them. We were very instrumental in connecting the people that have come into the community with the people that can get them information. There's been a noticeable trend to those of us involved in the NAS. Year after year, more and more of our action items have made their way into the city. With quick wins during budget season, last year Public Works tooted the alleyway cleanups and park beautifications. Beautiful Alleys was the seed of an idea when we in Gala learned that the city budget didn't cover the alleys. How could we get stuff cleaned up that was dumped literally in our backyards? We did what we always do, put out a call through social media, posters, rolled up our sleeves, and went to work. Most of you know that it spread quickly across the city, with the most recent cleanup day having approximately 175 alleys cleaned by about 200 volunteers, from Parkdale to Dundurn and from the Brow to the Bay. There's other examples of successes across our city, and McQuestion Urban Farms is one of them. The murals that we see on buildings and bridges, community gardens, street parks, park adoptions, all of these came from action plans that came out of the community hubs. And there was always people around the table that had those ideas. We often accomplish things without splashy budgets or without even knowing how we can go about it. Over the last 5 years, I would argue that we've all learned more than a layman's knowledge of the city bylaws, planning, zoning, and how we can work within those frameworks to make Gala a success. Through the chair many years ago, in response to the Code Red series, you responded by giving neighbors a table to sit at and funding to assist residents identify what they saw as issues instead of being prescriptive. You gave us tools and small grants to start working on things, and she writes really well. We've worked alongside city staff for park makeovers in Powell Park. We've worked alongside city staff with almost everything that we've done, and personally, I think that everybody has me blocked from their email and their phone because it's, hey, can you help us with this? So as we move into the future, look at all the good that has been done street by street, person by person. We've learned to listen and learn from each other and bring vibrancy instead where complacency was taking root. Many of us have moved beyond barbecues and balloons, and Gala has been instrumental in some issues like the Barton Corridor survey, which the repeal the tax. Those are things that are important to our residents, and that's why we have people at the table who take them on and lead them. Community leaders have emerged, many of which have delegated to you over the last 7 years, and we are excited for what the Neighbourhood Action Strategy 2.0 looks like and what we can achieve together. Thank you on behalf of Laura Farr. And Pat.
So thank you, through the chair, thank you very much, all of you, for your presentations. I'm so impressed with how eloquently you spoke and how many of the themes were the same in terms of the fact that there's some diversity, there's some unique needs and challenges which we're aware of, but that you've worked together to come up with a plan and you have a strong sense of purpose for your communities. And I'm really excited about the youth component. I think that this is going to continue to be an opportunity to engage with the youth. So we do have another component of this, which is our evaluation piece, and as well as next steps. But I just wondered through you, Chair, if there's any questions from the councillors prior to doing that piece of it.
Sure. Are there any questions? Councillor Whitehead?
On the next piece of the methodology in regards to the research that was done? Is that the question? Or
Yes,
we just talk about what was just presented to us now?
Vicki?
Yes, the next piece is about the evaluation that has been done on the neighborhoods, and there's 2 speakers for that. And the third piece is a component of the sort of review of the neighborhood program in the past 5 years called Reimagine, and they will update you on what they understand right now and then talk about the next steps.
Okay, so we have a report before us that's making a number of recommendations. At what point do we actually get into the substance of that report?
Vicki.
So the plan would be, if we finish that piece of it, then we would go to this report, if that's okay with the chair and the...
Okay, thank you. Councillor Green.
Not a question, but a comment, and I appreciate through you, Mr. Chair, that we were able to kind of expedite it by having all the groups come up. But as you know, in my ward, 4 out of the 11 or 12 hubs now. I just wanted to make the statement for everybody who found time to make it here tonight, the residents, just a tremendous amount of value that you bring to your communities and the time. I couldn't imagine, and I don't know if it's ever come up in terms of what that would look like as an operating budget, as a department, in terms of the goodwill and the commitment that's gone back throughout all of our neighborhoods. I couldn't even begin to imagine all the hours, the human hours that have gone into this. And so certainly we've gone through, maybe 2 or 3 of them here tonight, but collectively over the last 4 or 5 years, I would suggest that it is in the millions of dollars that you have added in value to this city and to your neighborhood. And knowing the folks that I've come up with in my neighborhood, I just want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you. Thank you.
Okay, on that point, I was going to allow for discussion or comments at the end of the meeting, but since Councillor Green started it, Councillor Collins, the floor is yours. So, Councillor Whitehead.
Well, I certainly, one of the councillors that have and the only existing one on the mountain. It's been an interesting evolution with this committee and a lot of the action plan and strategies they put forward. What was really intriguing to me is when they partnered with Mohawk College to take a look at the traffic issues within the neighborhood. I'm very proud of the activity, and we talked about value. Well, I would say it's priceless because there's more than just money. It's about the dedication and commitment of each and every one of you in these neighborhood strategies to improve on your communities and improve the quality of life and see action plans met. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak as I'm not a committee member. I didn't want to miss the opportunity to hear not just Riverdale and Davis Creek, but all the groups that presented today. And as I've said in the past, we're all very blessed to have an army of volunteers and residents who are working every single day of the year to improve the neighborhoods that make up part of the Neighbourhood Action Strategy, as well as doing what they do for the greater good of the entire city. And so I know oftentimes we look at things and we look at the support services that we put around the table. And I've been very blessed to have 2 community development workers, both Judy Kloosterman and Nazia, who've assisted me in the past, as well as the teams. But oftentimes we look around the table and say, we have a public library, we've got Green Venture, we've got, and the list goes on in terms of the support network that we have. But I oftentimes look at the the groups that make up the Neighborhood Action Strategy as our support network, because they're the sounding board for me in terms of bringing issues to table. If I use Davis Creek as the example, they're assisting me in terms of designing and building a new addition to the recreation center. We're going through that same process for Riverdale, and we have a plan for that in December in terms of public outreach and looking for their input. And so I've been very blessed to have them as my support network and assisting the residents who aren't showing up to the meetings, who aren't coming out to the neighborhood cleanups, who are not coming out to the special events. And I sometimes often feel that, over the last number of decades, there was a time when everyone knew their neighbor at one point in time, and things certainly have changed over the last number of decades. And I feel that as I look at all the groups who presented today, there's a common thread that brings them all together, and they're really bringing neighborhoods back, so to speak. And they are doing things that we probably haven't seen in quite some time, and that's because of the expert community developers that we have. That's because of the network of staff that we have that are assisting and all the support services that we've provided. And I just wanted to say sincerely, as someone who lives in one of the neighborhoods that presented here today, thank you. And thank you in particular to our youth. It's great to see adults attend, but when I see people like Tanisha and Isabella present here today, and they do wonderful things, as was presented by David and Sherry, they were referenced. I feel comfort in knowing that, at some point in time, we're all passing the torch to someone else. It's, young ladies like them and others that are going to help us move forward. And it's comforting to know that they're there now, learning from their elders and learning from those people who are around the table. So again, a sincere thanks to everyone who's doing terrific work. We certainly do have our challenges in some areas, but we are definitely making progress.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. If I could pass the chair over to Councillor Whitehead for a moment. Through you, Mr. Chairman, let me just start off by saying it would be remiss of us not to firstly acknowledge and thank Pat Reed, who's here this evening in the audience from the McQuestion neighborhood. And the reason why I point that out is I think the Neighborhood Action Strategy really was born in McQuestion, and I inherited Pat as a resident, and I can assure you that the foundation of everything that we do was born and expanded from that particular neighborhood. And for that, we really do need to give her another round of applause for all of her work. Let me also say I'm very blessed to have Homeside, who's in the development stages of their particular initiatives, and obviously Crown Point. And I can remember a time when if councillors were to be dealing with neighborhood issues at the grassroots level as we are, we would be considered parochial and ward healers. Now it's considered to be something that's worthy of applause and something that we can work collectively towards representing the people who actually elect us, as opposed to the bureaucratic fiefdom and the editorial boards who try to direct us on how to represent those communities. And for that, I want to applaud all of you for being part of that process that empowered not only neighborhoods, but council to be more representative under representative democracy. And for that, I thank you all. And I will now take the chair over. Yes, Councillor Green.
On the round of thanks, I think I'd be remiss if we didn't also acknowledge the incredibly generous contribution over the years from the Hamilton Community Foundation. I know we have Mr. Terry Cook and Mr. Matt Goodman here and others. Certainly, when I had the privilege of being on the board there in 2010 and saw this kind of take root, we know that at a time maybe when council was a little bit more tepid, the foundation came to the table with a substantial investment. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge them as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Okay, may I have a motion?
Just one last thank you, and that's the Social Planning Research Council in regards to their initial facilitation of the development planners and many of the groups, the neighborhood associations. So I know Renee's here, and I want to thank her on behalf of council as well.
Any more thank yous? Councillor John.
Thank you for allowing me to thank you And the rest of my colleagues. I was thrilled at our initial NES meeting of council when we had, it was a GIC at the time, and a standing recorded unanimous vote to get into this with our partners, Community Foundation, SPRC, and some terrific staff. Some have moved on to bigger and better things, and that includes, as was mentioned by one of our delegates, our neighborhood development coordinators that have been phenomenal as facilitating those conversations at the neighborhood meetings that have led to incredible results, I think, and actions that personally I feel very pleased to be part of. It's what we envisioned. That has truly come to a reality here in Ward 2. Obviously, I can speak to what we've heard from Beasley and the Stinson community, as recently in Stinson, and as Carl referenced, the community garden. The work that those folks do and their partners like McMaster University students, and of course all emanating from the Neighborhood Association conversations with those community development workers and obviously the councillor. It's easy for me, as you noted too, Chair Marula, when you have the people that actually live in the communities identifying the needs, identifying the challenges, identifying the needs, and then being able to assist them in working towards actions. And sometimes it's not just about, finding the funds through area rating, capital reserves for, in Stinson's case, the community garden. That's nominal. It's about the bringing of the people together, but it's also motions on the floor. Beasley referenced Autumn had another great delegation of, I think, 3 in the last year, but this last one was a keeper. Autumn, really well done. Speaking from the heart, as we've grown accustomed to, but speaking to one of the issues on family-friendly housing policy. Born from the Beasley neighborhood, the very always inclusive Beasley Neighborhood Association, their work in the community, taking a negative that was John and Houston high-rises that were, as Autumn rightly pointed out, being separated, larger units into more singular units, and thus the Greenwind folks were able to command a greater rent because now you've got 2, but look what it did to school enrollment. Gentrification, a major issue for most of the neighborhood associations, if not all, in Ward 2. And in this particular case in Beasley, and as Autumn referenced, we were able to not only hear them out, hear about those challenges, but actually move motions unanimously received just a couple of weeks ago that seek to tackle the very issues, in this case, family-friendly units, the lack of, the school enrollments going down on the council floor. So those are the kinds of things that really cost nothing, put our staff to work, and when we see unanimity in support from the elected officials for those actions that address those, in many cases, serious challenges in the neighborhoods, that to me is what it's all about. I couldn't be more proud to be working with neighborhood groups toward successes where challenges once were the norm. And I'm really, really appreciative, as I am each and every year when we do this, to just sit back and listen to the great stories and truly feel the passion and the pride from those folks who live in those communities. So thank you, all of you. Always well done.
Well said, Councillor Farr. All right, we are now moving on to Mr. Al Fletcher, who will introduce the evaluators. Mr. Fletcher, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. So we've been lucky with Neighbourhood Action Strategy to be involved with 2 independent evaluations that are being undertaken. The Hamilton Neighbourhood Study through McMaster University and the Neighbourhood Action Evaluation that's being done through the University of Toronto. So we sat around tables, we've had discussions about their opinions, their findings, the challenges, and the opportunities. So as part of this presentation, we'll have both parties that have been asked to come here and speak. And we're going to start with Jim Dunn from the Hamilton Neighbourhood Study and McMaster University. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. And Mr. Dunn, welcome.
Thanks very much. Ready to go?
One moment before you start. We just got a request for lights as a result of video. Can we turn on some lights without affecting?
No, lights for the video.
Yeah.
Just at a low setting, it's got too dark for the camera to pick up. On. Just at a low setting, it's enough.
Let's go over to the wall.
I think the first option was fine. The bright ones? That's no problem. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Welcome, Mr. Dunn. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much. I'll be relatively quick in the interest of time because you've got all the information in front of you as well. But as the slides show, we've been engaged in trying to understand the impact of the Hamilton Neighbourhood Action Strategy for the last few years. And for the most part, what we've been interested in is a couple of different kinds of outcomes. On the one hand, previous work in this area where they've tried to evaluate place-based interventions like this one have identified both place-based outcomes and people-based outcomes. In general, the place-based outcomes are things that are able to move a little bit quicker than the people-based outcomes, which tend to take a longer period of time. So we wanted to just identify those. The study that we've done is a study of 6 of the 11 neighborhoods because the very early days it was staged and these were the initial 6, and we've been following these neighborhoods. We followed them over a 2-year period of time, and we collected data from starting in 2013 and 14 and then on to 2015-16. The truth of the matter is that in order to recruit 1,800 people into the study across the 6 neighborhoods, it actually took 2 years to complete all of those interviews. We made contact with about 4,000 different people, and in that process we actually got information out to the communities and those individuals about the existence of the neighborhood strategy. So we actually coordinated very carefully with the Neighborhood Action Strategy itself in order to disseminate information about how they could get involved. But as I say, there were 300 people, 1,800 overall in the NAS group. And then this is the thing that's new that you're seeing today is that we've compared a number of our measures to what we call a benchmark group. And the benchmark group was essentially a group of 300 survey respondents that we managed to recruit from very similar neighborhoods across the city that were not in Neighborhood Action Strategy neighborhoods. So overall, 39% of NAS residents, compared to only 23% in the benchmark group, agreed that over the past 2 years, since the beginning of the NAS, I think my neighborhood has gotten better to live in as a whole. And drilling down into some of the specifics with that, overall neighborhood satisfaction up by about 4%. Living in my neighborhood gives me a sense of pride, up by 3%. People in my neighborhood can be trusted, up by 5%. And people in my neighborhood share the same values, up by 5%. In addition to that, we've got some kind of process questions that we asked about. My neighborhood continually looks for solutions to problems, and that's up by 5%. I have influence over what my neighborhood is like, is up by 4%. Residents are invited to be involved in decision-making in my neighborhood, up by 9%, and the city is responsive to residents' inquiries, input, and/or requests. I think that's just a testament, no growth in that, but that's just a testament to how effective the neighborhood organizations themselves are. In terms of future priorities for the NAS, 33% of residents know that there's a plan for their neighborhood created by fellow residents and that the planning team is happening on a monthly basis, but there's a number of barriers to them participating. And the thing I thought that was really heartening is just how many of the neighborhood groups earlier spoke to their desire and their efforts to try and involve a widespread cross-section of people. A couple of other things that came out of this from a priority area is housing affordability. Housing affordability is the #1 reason why many people move to their neighborhood, but nevertheless they still face very, very high housing costs relative to income across the board, with the exception of one of the neighborhoods. One of the other things that came through time and time again had to do with education, job creation, and economic development. So the thing we heard over and over again was that income security and jobs were a huge issue. Finally, in terms of health, we saw some improvements. These all are declines in the prevalence of a number of different measures, which actually signal improvements because those were negative measures. In summary, a number of things that have improved. We've seen progress on satisfaction and pride in the neighborhoods, social cohesion, social capital, and city-neighborhood relations. And things that can be addressed in the future include community engagement, affordable housing, jobs and income security, and health can always be improved as well. Thank you for your attention.
Are there any questions? Mr. Dunn, I believe there are questions. Yes. Councillor Whitehead.
Yeah.
Thought you might do it.
When we set out to start this process, it was a process to identify code red and neighborhoods that felt were at higher risk, and that's what was focused on first. But the idea was that as we moved down the road with this particular model, it would be an expandable model. We got over, I think somebody mentioned, over 100 neighborhoods within the city of Hamilton. And there's certainly other neighborhoods that are on that verge in regards to social issues and so forth. So, so I take valuations, I look at it in a broader light. And I'm also looking at empirical data. So did you have a control group when you did this analysis? When you did the benchmarking, was there a control group that you utilized?
That's the benchmark group.
That's the benchmark group?
Yep.
Now, I noticed that most of the numbers that you identified are all within what we call in the data world, the statistical world, within the degree of error. It's usually between 3% and 5%, depending on the methodology and numbers that you survey. So help me understand, what is the degree of error in the methodology that you utilized? Standard
well, those, yeah, the changes that I showed you are statistically significant ones. So without getting into stats class, we can be confident at 95 times out of 100 to a degree. Yeah, so I mean, there is a margin of error without question, but essentially the margin of error is accounted for in the statistical significance
testing. So it's already built into the,
yep.
Okay, I need to know that because, I mean, like I said, normally you'll see pollsters or researchers will put down plus, minus 2, 3, 4, 5 percent, depending on, again, the degree and the methodology that was exercised. So I appreciate that. The other thing that I didn't see here, and there's been a number of things happen. So, for example, right now they just announced that Hamilton is at 4% unemployment. We've been pretty persistent and below the provincial and national average in unemployment.
Yep.
And 4% from an economic point of view is almost, virtual of full employment.
Yep.
The other thing and challenge we had in the code red was available doctors. And I sit on the chair of the physician recruitment. And I can tell you with great satisfaction that the Lower City now have enough doctors per ratio based on the population. And my understanding in the mountain, there's a shortage of 23 doctors in regards to our overall numbers. When I look at empirical data, then I'm looking at hospital visits, clinic visits, those kinds of things. I don't see that in the report. Was that data not available through?
Yeah, and that was outside of our current scope. So the current scope was to do questionnaires with residents who were part of the 6 neighborhoods of the 11 that were part of the Neighbourhood Action Strategy and followed changes in time. Those broader things that you're talking about, I think, are things that are worth updating, and yeah, keen to see that done.
I appreciate,
because we're now at about 10 years since the Spectator Series. The data that the Spectator Series was based on would have been about 10 years ago.
And the reason I'm asking that, because this all started as a code red, which was all the social issues and measures that determine that whole terminology. So clearly that's a benchmark in itself in regards to how we're doing with the strategies that are being implemented. So we're doing really good on these fronts. I'm just asking on the core piece that started this whole process, low birth weight babies and et cetera. how are we doing in these neighborhoods relative to those identified issues through the Code Red series?
Yeah, so there's a good opportunity to look at that next year when the 2016 census is fully available. So right now we're at the point where the last couple of measures from the 2016 census have yet to be released. So in the year 2018 would be a very, very good time to do that. So,
Great. So I thank you very much for your work, but I need to ask those questions.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I don't want to lose sight
No,
of
I
the
think
core issue that
I
started
actually completely agree with you. Like I said, it's been the Spectator series was based on data that's now about 10 years old. So now's the time, and the 2011 census had some problems with it. So now we're at the point where we can have reliable data, and 2018 is the year to do it.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay, no further questions. Sorry, move the presentation. Moved by Green, seconded by Partridge. All in favor? Carried.
All right, thank you.
Still one more component before we can receive.
No, his presentation, no. Oh, sorry. Okay, we'll hold off on the
Yeah, that's why I ran off.
All
But
right,
you're going
thank
to
you.
save questions till the end. Thanks.
All righty. Mr. Fletcher, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Just the Neighbourhood Action Evaluation Group will come down, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves to you as part of their presentation.
Thanks, Al. Thank you, Council. And I know we're standing between you and your dinner, so we're in an unenviable position, but we will be brief.
Yes, we will. So my name is Kayon Christine. I'm a research assistant with the Neighbourhood Action Evaluation Team.
And I'm Carla Borsad-Clausen, the research officer with the Neighbourhood Action Evaluation. We work with Dr. Sarah Wakefield, who unfortunately is teaching tonight, so couldn't join us. She does send her regrets.
So we work with a team of research assistants and Sarah, who has been leading this evaluation since 2013. Our research has been funded by by two national academic funding bodies, the Canadian Institute for Health Research and the Social Science and Humanities Research Council.
We take a developmental process evaluation approach, which in English means that we research how the initiative happens over time, so the process, and then we respond in our methods and approach to changes in the initiative as it evolves, the development. We evaluate NAS planning and implementation, and our key questions in this evaluation are, how is the NAS being implemented? How does it change or evolve over time? And then what challenges or opportunities do stakeholders face in working towards their goals?
So we've collected data for this evaluation in 3 different ways. The first is through our annual focus groups with neighborhood planning teams, in which we ask about the status of each action on their action plan and also discuss barriers and enablers to the progression of them. The second, we've conducted 116 in-depth, semi-structured interviews with resident leaders, community developers, city staff, and other key stakeholders in the NAS. And third, our team members observe monthly planning team meetings in all NAS neighborhoods.
In terms of progress on those neighborhood action plans, you can see here that between 2014 and 2017, the percentage of complete action items in blue increased by 20%, so from 14 to 34% of all action items. In that same period, non-active items in red decreased by 16% from 49 to 33%, and active items also decreased from 37 to 33%.
So because this is mainly qualitative research, the results of our work are best understood through themes that stand out across various interviews and experiences, and the perceptions that folks have with the NAS and its work. So we'll briefly touch on 6 of the major themes in our most recent data, and please let us know at the end of our presentation if you would like more information on our methods of analysis or more specifics about any of these themes. So the first theme is that residents are celebrating. Many residents are feeling a growing pride in their neighborhoods and seeing increased momentum in terms of resident leadership on local matters.
We've also heard clearly, as we have tonight, that community developers are invaluable. Community developers are seen as central in supporting resident engagement and in facilitating neighborhood work.
Another theme that we heard tonight is that, and this is something that's persisted throughout the 4 years that we've been conducting this evaluation, is that inclusive neighborhood planning still remains a challenge. So planning teams are often struggling to represent the full diversity of their neighborhoods, and efforts towards greater inclusion have been made, such as providing food and childcare at neighborhood planning team meetings, and some neighborhoods have training available.
And again, as we've heard from many other speakers tonight, there are concerns about displacement, and those concerns are growing. Residents and other stakeholders have observed positive changes in their communities, to be sure, but many have also been observing and some personally experiencing residential displacement. There is a perception among some stakeholders that the speed and intensity of gentrification and displacement could not have been predicted at the outset of the NAS. Stakeholders expressed a desire to see this strategy do more to combat residential displacement and to make sure that the NAS doesn't become a vehicle that in fact speeds up gentrification.
Another theme that we heard tonight is that planning teams need consistent and accessible meeting spaces. So planning teams encounter significant barriers to accessing consistent and adequate meeting spaces. Some meetings move around often, and trying to meet the team's needs and sharing the location information affects who and how many people come out to the planning team meetings to participate. This means that residents' time and energy often go into dealing with where to meet and how to communicate that, which then takes time away from working on the community's own goals.
Finally, decision-making matters. All stakeholder groups are advocating for more clarity around structure, roles, and responsibilities. And certainly this is something that the NAS and its partners are working towards through the Reimagining project, which we'll hear about in a moment. As the NAS undergoes this transition, our research suggests that transparency about the structure, roles, and responsibilities is the most important feature of any collaborative community development initiative, rather than any one specific model for this kind of work.
So these are some of the key highlights from our most recent data from the evaluation of the Neighbourhood Action Strategy, and we really hope that they've been useful in understanding some of the current successes and challenges of the initiatives. So we thank you for your time and attention and welcome any questions that you may have about our work.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Green?
Certainly an overview for the purposes of our, impending dinner, what have you, but with this work, I would imagine that it's pretty substantive in its totality. So is there somewhere that this could be made available in terms of looking at the fullness of your research and having access to it?
Absolutely. Thanks very much for your question. Through you, Mr. Chair. We do have a website where all of our reports that have been released are posted, and that is at neighborhoodevaluation.com. So certainly that's accessible. We also have a Facebook page, but the website's really the spot where all of our reports go. And really, we do prepare quite a few formats for our reports. So each neighborhood focus group, there's a summary, a two-page summary of that. There are also some other thematic papers where we've talked about things like displacement across the neighborhoods. That'll be on our website later this week and such. So.
And lastly, are you using, because we've heard it here today, some of our neighborhoods feel like they've been studied to death. What steps and processes do you have in place to be able to report back to these neighborhoods with a popular education model that is accessible to everybody? You've heard about newspapers that are in our communities. What plans and steps do you take to report back to the residents that you have worked with?
Thanks for the question again. Through you, Mr. Chair, we do, so when we do focus groups, for example, which is an annual activity, we do go back always to the planning teams and say, this is what we think we heard, did we get that right? So because our research assistants like Kayon and others who are, Melanie's here too, are at those meetings already, we're checking in with them, did we hear you correctly? And then in terms of format for reporting, we have some standard ways that we do things, but we're always adaptable to whatever works for folks. So we have sometimes put our findings into some of those neighborhood newspapers that we heard about tonight. And then in terms of being sort of overstudied, and certainly consultation fatigue is very real, we're very much aware of it, and we just continue to have those conversations with the other research teams about how we can best collaborate and try to minimize that over-consultation so that we're sharing findings as relevant, so that we are also, in terms of the tracking, as those new plans come out, we're meeting to try to coordinate those efforts so that we're doing as little disturbance and consultation as possible so that folks around the tables can get their own work done.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate both you, Carla and Kayon, for being here today, and look forward to checking out the website and hearing from the neighborhood kind of how they felt that process unfolded and how they're going to take perhaps some of these themes moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you. One of the presenters talked about they had to change their bylaws, for example, to extend the length of time that something would be on, could be on the executive because of the challenge of getting people involved on the core group. So the question I have for you, and I don't know if you've done this part of your analysis, is from the inception of the neighborhood strategy, how many of the core group or the executive are the same people?
Thanks for the question. So through you, Mr. Chair, we don't have quantitative data on that because our study is primarily qualitative. The quantitative, the numbers piece is really around tracking the action items themselves. So those are those pie charts you saw earlier. The rest of the work really is qualitative, so it's about themes, but certainly resident burnout and quick turnover has been a theme that we have encountered in the past. We didn't hear it as clearly in this last round of interviews as we had in the past. Certainly it comes up, but in trying to speak only for 5 minutes and have 6 key themes, it maybe didn't rank quite as highly as it has, but it certainly has been a challenge that the stakeholders that we've consulted with over the last 4 years have mentioned, and I think the fact that we heard about it so much here this evening suggests that it is a problem that is not unique to one neighborhood, and that rather it's likely to be something that's citywide at the very least, but I would argue it's probably much broader than Hamilton. So we don't have those actual numbers in terms of the number of people on the executive or on the planning team itself who have persisted, but we have heard from stakeholders, primarily residents, that it has been a challenge, certainly.
I appreciate that. I think the reason obviously the reason I asked the question is what strategies that hasn't been contemplated in respect to ensuring that the same people are taking on all the weight, and that's where you get burnout. That you in fact have tools that could be utilized to expand that workload so that you can truly have very little amount of time by every individual if you have a larger a group involved. And unfortunately, in many organizations, I'm seeing it on the sports side, it's the same 4 or 5 people that have been doing it for 14 years, and they're at the stage that they'll be leaving, and the concern is that what you have left is no organization, and you lose that quality of life in the neighborhood. So at some point, I'd love to have a discussion about what those strategies might be to help facilitate many of the organizations so that it's not about so much turnover, it's just about attracting more people and get engaged in the process, and what are the barriers in which prevent them from doing so that we can address what those barriers are in future plans and strategies. So I want to highlight that piece. The other thing, the comment we heard by one individual is one of the organizations, and I've heard this before, is, and I'm going to boil it down to the autonomy of these organizations. And some of them really want, it's one thing to help nurture them and teach them and help them evolve as an organization in regards to service levels and so forth. But it's another thing to allow them to have their own autonomy and working together as a group and identifying what their priorities are. Did you get any feedback through this process that they felt they were truly independent in these processes?
So thank you for the question. I wouldn't say, through you, Mr. Chair, I wouldn't say that that is a specific question that we asked about, but certainly in the theme around decision-making and governance, I think there are various interpretations of who gets a seat at which tables within the broader strategy and partnerships that make up the NAS. So, you know, we heard about resident leadership, and that the implementation of that value, I think, varies from neighborhood to neighborhood. Sometimes that's about capacity, sometimes that's about all sorts of things, but rather, what am I trying to say? Essentially just that we don't have, it was sort of, you know, we didn't rate sort of how independent do you feel, but I think there is variation, I will say. Is that fair to say? I mean, Kayon attends 7 of the 11 planning teams. I don't know if you wanted to speak to this at all.
No, that you're saying exactly what.
So I think there's variation, and what from the sort of the literature that we've reviewed around other models, other communities that are doing similar initiatives, again, the key theme is just transparency around who gets to make which decisions, and that I think speaks to your question around independence. The transparency about that is the most important thing, rather than there being any magic bullet or sort of perfect model of how to do this work. It is messy. It can easily get unclear about who's responsible for what and who sort of owns which pieces. So trying to be as clear as possible about that matters the most.
Appreciate the work that you've done, and I do believe it's helpful. I just want to throw those couple of points out because I really want to see this continue to flourish. And I want to make sure that if there are barriers, we identify what those barriers are. We break down those barriers with great strategies. But we can't hide away. We can't. That's the elephant in the room. We can't ignore that elephant in the room in respect to the longevity of these organizations and in regards to ensuring that people are at the table.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Many thanks for your time. There are no further questions, so we'll move on now. Mr. Fletcher, you'll introduce our Reimagine presenters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like any master plan, after 5 years or so, you reflect on what you've done and you look towards changes. And you've heard through many of the presentations today that while there's been many successes, there's also been some challenges. So over the past year and through till the end of the year, there's a lot of work that's being done led through a reimagining team, led by staff from the Hamilton Community Foundation and support from the city. So there's 2 phases to this. Phase 1 was more of an information gathering from the residents, and phase 2 is looking at how we operationalize this. So what I would do is welcome the Reimagine team to the podium, and the phase 1 resident researchers who did the phase 1 portion of information gathering will present, and followed by phase 2, which is Mel Walter, who will speak about where we're going through the end of the year and into next year. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fletcher, and welcome, folks. The floor is yours.
We're up. Good evening, Council and staff. I'm Brenda Duke, and I'm with the Gibson and Lansdale Community Planning Team.
I'm Tina Dort, and I'm the Stinson Treasurer.
And I'm Al Karsten. I'm from the Ralston neighborhood, and also I'm the communication officer there.
So last year, 7 community residents were asked to be part of the Reimagine research team. The team was made up of residents active in the community from 7 of the 11 designated hubs, plus a group of specialized researchers. Our task was to interview and interact with community residents in all 11 hubs and beyond, with community partners, key people in the Neighbourhood Action Strategy, Hamilton Community Foundation, and the city. And why do we do that? Because it was time. It was time to encourage the NAS to continue evolving and be responsive to the growing needs and opportunities of the neighbourhoods. Time to confront challenges that were identified and address things that weren't working. Time to learn more about the NAS, where we live, and determine how the NAS could continue to improve and improve the work that they do.
The draft report builds from the history of the Neighbourhood Action Strategy, a literature review, and input from the community. We looked at the current mission, vision, and values of the NAS and defined our primary focus and objectives. Among those, we determined that it was important to build connections and recognize resident-driven plans by building on the natural strength that already exists within our communities, as well as strengthening relationships with the city while focusing on social justice. Our research established 5 guiding principles: that the NAS should be welcoming, collaborative, responsive, and inventive, while recognizing the complexity in our work. Each of us has a story or experience that supports these guiding principles. Our framework was based off 10 essential program elements. They consist of NAS neighborhoods, planning teams, small grants, ongoing learning and training, neighborhood action plans, projects and events, the role of community developers, and city-led initiatives. These elements reach beyond simply the planning teams. Evaluation and reflection support clear and responsive structures to make it all happen.
Our reflection on working together showed us why the project is important, because it was a start. The process gave us an opportunity to gather feedback from participants about our draft report and findings. Were people's thoughts and recommendations analyzed to include all input? Had we checked if our first-hand experience were well reflected? This led us to ask, is the project important? And yes, it is, because we continue to share our findings, hear from residents, and learn from their experience. In other words, it's a draft and a redraft in order to get that input. Our purpose in this research was to lay the groundwork for Phase 2, to recognize key components that bring the NAS to the level that the interviews and ongoing check-ins highlighted are being important to the communities. These components consist of being responsive to challenges and opportunities that come up, grassroots community engagement focusing on inclusivity, equity, and access, and determining how decisions are made and who has the power to make those decisions. This includes who the essential actors are in this story and what do their relationship mean to each other. And most of all, we need to remember the importance of building ongoing relationships, understanding, and focus through communication.
The research team went into this project hoping to make a difference that would benefit our communities by incorporating the learning and knowledge from Phase 1 and building on the findings and the themes that we heard. We all came into this for different reasons. Some of us weren't sure if it would make a difference, but I really hoped that you would listen. Our next step is taking these ideas and moving forward to plan how the NAS can continue to grow and be an active and supportive member of our communities.
Hi, my name is Mel Walther, and I'm going to give a bit of an update on how we are starting into the Phase 2 process of the Reimagine project. So as Al, Tina, and Brenda just talked about, Phase 1, we talked to all sorts of people in different groups and organizations in order to build a conceptual framework for the NAS. We got to the point where we could establish 3 big ideas, big philosophies and theories that undergird the work that we're doing, 5 guiding principles that tell us a little bit about how we work together and how we should accomplish this work, and then the 10 essential program elements, which are the concrete things that define the NAS and make it what it is. The main task now, as they said, is to take those ideas and turn them into concrete operational updates. We've got lots of information to work with already. We have all of the findings from our various evaluation teams. We have the knowledge of our experiences over the last 6 years, and we even have some good hints from the conversations that we had in Phase 1. When people were talking about the concepts and ideas and the values that were important to the Neighbourhood Action Strategy, you necessarily get to talking about some of the more concrete details about how the strategy is structured, and so we got a pretty good head start, and we're able to identify the specific places that we need a little bit more information. So we've designed the Phase 2 process to really target those places where we need to get a better sense of what we can change to make the strategy better. So how exactly are we doing this? We're trying to do it as collaboratively as possible. We're working alongside the NAS partners and trying to involve as many different people and organizations as possible. We're also following the principles and values that have informed the NAS work from the beginning and those which were confirmed during our Phase 1 conversations and the conceptual framework that we developed. I'm a member of the, the consulting or academic research team. The resident researchers outlined the 2 sort of parts of the Reimagine project team, the residents and then the academics or consulting researchers, which I tend to refer to as the nerds, the nerd team. That's how I see us. And so as the nerds, we were selected for this project, not just because of our capacity to engage in critical investigations of appropriate theoretical work, but also because between the 4 of us, we have combined experience with a range of collaborative and community-based processes, and in particular, participatory qualitative research, which was important for the steering committee of the Neighbourhood Action Strategy when they decided to undertake this review process. So we're approaching the second part of the project like we did in phase 1 by continuing to explore the boundaries of the conventional approaches to program design and experimenting with thoughtful and intentional methods to center the role of residents in the work that we're doing, and by being responsive and adaptive throughout this very dynamic and complex project. We're trying to meet a diverse collection of participant preferences and expectations in the work, and we rely on the individual assets and strengths of everyone involved. So, here's a map of what we're doing. Oh, the words are all off. Okay. It looks complicated. We are building out from what we did in phase 1. So in phase 1, we did a lot of interviews and small group conversations. But in phase 2, we're also adding in facilitated discussions, work groups, focus groups. We are doing a series of 4 community conversations. We've done 3 of them already. And we are working with all of these different groups of people, residents, and community groups, service providers, the funding partners, community developers, and specific subject area advisors, other nerds. And we are drawing on the strengths of some of the phase 1 resident researchers who have decided to stick around and participate in phase 2 of the process. So with their help and with their expertise, we're able to connect to specific community groups like youth, seniors, newcomers, non-English speaking language groups, and we are also making use of the particular talents of some of those phase 1 resident researchers. We have a asset-based community development facilitator and instructor who is part of our team, and she's been essentially, she's designed the workshops that we're using and taking out to all of the different communities. And so we have in this project a huge variety of ways that people can engage and contribute their thoughts and ideas to help us build a new generation of the NIS. So what exactly are we talking about? I said in phase 1 we were talking about developing the conceptual framework. So the ideas, values, the big theories that undergird the work. And in phase 2, we're trying to look more at the operations and what operational updates that we might be able to make to the NIS. And we're drawing on the themes that we identified in phase 1, and we've listed them here. In our draft report, which is available on our website and is a living documented draft, we identified 6 themes in order to build our conceptual framework. So what is the NIS? Conversations about what exactly the NIS is for, and conversations about the tensions between different interpretations of what the NIS is, the importance of emergence and grassroots efforts, how to increase equity and access in the work, the roles of actors and relationship building, as well as questions about governance and power and the importance of communication. So we're taking all of these themes and we have organized them to structure conversations about operational updates. And we're doing this in 2 ways. So we have structured the themes around the essential program elements, so the 10 elements that the residents took us through earlier, and we've created a consultation package that goes through each of these and asks specific questions relating to each of these elements. And the other half is talking more generally, broadly, about the governance structure and looking at different possible operational models that we could use for the NIS in the future. So next steps. We're hoping to finish our conversations and consultations by the end of December, and then start to really analyze what we heard in phase 2. We will then review and update the phase 1 draft conceptual framework and prepare a report covering what we learned in both phase 1 and phase 2, and making some suggestions for some operational updates. Okay. And just My final slide is a reminder about why we're doing all of this work and a little note on why it's really exciting. We've been here a while now. We've heard from a lot of different people. And one of the things that I found really remarkable is the diversity of this strategy itself. We had people talking about really small concrete projects, but we also had people talking about really big issues that are complex things to address. And what I think is really exciting about this review that we're doing is that we get to look really, really closely in fine detail about all of the things that are working, and more importantly, some of the things that aren't working perfectly yet. And I think the only way to make improvements is to look really closely at those things. And by having all of these in-depth conversations, we're getting a good picture of exactly what is going on in the neighborhoods in relationship to the strategy. It's also exciting because the way we're going about doing phase 2 and this review process, we are learning better how to work with all of the different partners. And we are modeling different ways of working together. And that's been really fun and exciting and informative as well. And finally, the thing that I find really exciting personally is that what we're doing here in Hamilton is actually part of a broader trend of what cities all over the world are doing in order to address increasingly complex and interrelated policy challenges through focusing on community development and neighborhoods and working in new ways with residents. And there's a little, can you click your globe? Okay, so for a while, it seemed that every time I talked to Al Fletcher, he was telling me that he had just come from a meeting with somebody from another city who was curious about the work that we were doing here in Hamilton. And I eventually had the opportunity to talk with him, and he listed some of the cities that have approached us and said, hey, what are you doing? And here's what we're doing. And so this globe actually spins and has pins on it to point to the different cities that have been in touch with Hamilton in relation to this work, but it's not working. All right. So anyway, that's it. The last slide just says thank you. And it is just a sort of thank you slide, but it's also a specific opportunity for me to say thank you to everyone for being engaged in this work and supporting this work and taking a risk and experimenting. It's good. Thank you.
Many thanks. We have Councillor Green, then Farr. Councillor Green.
Thank you. I'll keep my comments brief through you, Mr. Chair, just to say that to the members of this committee in particular, I'm glad that we had the opportunity to take this presentation as the finale, kind of leading up from the neighborhoods and the studies, because to be quite candid with you, going through this process, I, as a councillor, wasn't sure where we were going to land, and I didn't have a high degree of comfort based on everything that I experienced in my time, both in the community and here at council. But seeing how you guys have been able to organically and authentically engage and do this process and start to put it on a direction, I think will get it back on track, if I could be so bold as to say, for me is very, very, very encouraging. So I just want to thank you, Mel, and all the residents that are involved in this, and certainly your work, Sarah, through McMaster. This is very encouraging, and I'll just finish my statement, Mr. Chair, by saying that in having a great conversation this afternoon with Grace around the direction, not just of the Neighbourhood Action Strategy, but of the culture of the City of Hamilton, I still fundamentally believe that what we're learning through this process needs to go not in a department, but across all departments, and how we deal with planning and how we deal with public works and how we deal with budgeting. And really, it needs to be public health. It needs to be core to the values of how we operate as a city. And so you guys are way out there in terms of trying to unpack these very complex questions that we've been all dealing with. And we've certainly heard from the neighborhoods today. But I just want to take this moment and really highlight that and thank you, and know that my intention from my position is to see this work from the NAS go across all departments in a real way, not in a, in a symbolic way, but in a real way. So thank you.
Councillor Farr.
Just on the reimagining presentation, page 38, the next step slide, can you throw it on 2 slides back, Sarah? What are the timelines on basically just a process through you, Chair, to our presenter?
Who would like to answer
When
that?
do we expect this to be completed?
So we know that, thank you through the chair. Sorry.
No worries.
First time. We know that we're going to finish our conversations and start the analysis at the end of December. I know that the city has a little bit more of a clear picture on specific timelines that we will be reporting back, and perhaps you guys could take over and fill in the gaps here.
Al, can you expand upon that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair, the plan is that at the end of December, all the conversations and consultations has been done, bring all that information together for some discussions on how we move forward. Our intent is at the end of Q2 to be back before council with a recommendation on how to move NAS forward and our suggestions, which will probably come with resources and funding requests that would be built into a request for the 2019 budget.
Okay. And while I have Al through you, Chair, real quick, since he's jumped on, great stuff. Really good presentations. And Duke with the double whammy today. Nice job. The ball didn't spin. The world was stuck on, it looked like Tahiti or something. I hope you didn't visit there, but if it did spin, where were some of the communities that you visited, Al, in the last 6 months to a year that have been impressed with some of the work we're doing?
Through the chair, so the places that I haven't visited but visited us were New Zealand and the UK. They came to, the New Zealand was part of Sport New Zealand, and through discussions with Jim Deere about community development and how to build their sports programs, he said, if you want to see how this is being done, go to Canada, go to Ontario, and start with Hamilton. So that was very exciting, and the 2 guys from New Zealand were a lot of fun. From the UK, it was more about community engagement as it relates to affordable housing and the housing developments that they deal with. So as part of those discussions, what worked out really well was that a group got together as a network of those who do community development, which included London, Kitchener, Waterloo, Burlington, and even the Tamarack people who run conferences were there and had discussions. We've also had discussions as far as Vancouver, Guelph, and Windsor, I believe, have been the most recent. So in the words of Paul Tackle, our chief librarian, we practice R&D, which is rip off and duplicate, but I think of it more as sharing as caring, and that we spread the information between our partners, who I consider other municipalities within Canada and abroad.
Thank you, Councillor Farr. There are no further questions. Oh, motion. Are we there yet, Madam Clerk? No, we're not quite there yet. We're not quite there yet. So, Councillor Whitehead?
And thank you, and I want to apologize to Al, who's been one of our stalwarts in the Ralston neighborhood, who does an incredible job with the balance of the executive. And one of the things I'm really impressed with, and this is difficult when you're dealing with the neighborhood, is the social housing aspect. And I can tell you that nothing was so impressive than seeing the Ralston community take on the Mountain Secondary School site, which we were now going to designate part of it for social housing. And we're going to preserve green space for Yeovil in respect to a small park. Those are the kind of feedback, and that's what really makes it easy for a councillor to come back to the table with his colleagues and make decisions. So I do plan to do more planning issues within the neighborhood, and use the Ralston neighborhood, for example, as a sounding board to engage their community and get some feedback to help inform me as we come to council and make decisions. So I think there's tools we haven't really optimized yet that we can. And the point is that I love the fact that we're going through this exercise, because I think you'll identify the fact that we could do a whole lot more. I think Councillor Green touched on it very nicely, that we can't approach this as like a silo, neighborhood strategy silo. No, it's not. It needs to be integrated with almost every aspect of services that the city provides, and there has to be an interlinkage between those service departments and the neighborhood strategies. So I look forward to that. So Gal, that was my public apology for not being in the room when you probably did an excellent job as you normally do. The question I have, maybe this is for Al, because you sort of touched on it. $2 million, we start with $2 million for the neighborhood strategy, if I recall. I'm going through the staff report here, yet we have this reimagining the neighborhood action strategy, and I don't see it identified in this report from a budget point of view.
Mr. Fletcher?
Through the chair to the councillor, we received approval from council to support the Hamilton Community Foundation and provide funding through an earlier report that was done. I think there was actually 2 reports that were previously approved through council.
Okay, so I just want, because I'm just looking what's before us here today. So a lot of the reimagining the neighborhood action strategy, I want to be clear, this is not just about the current neighborhood associations that are in the neighborhood strategy that's being supported by the city, but we're looking at something that's transferable for other neighborhoods to take up in regards to governance structures, objectives, and all those kinds of things. Is that correct? To whoever can answer that question.
Who'd like to take a stab at that? So I guess the question is, this is more than just what's being presented. It's really a catalyst to other growth in neighborhood groups.
So I can answer from a Reimagine project team perspective, but I think also you probably want a little bit of a response from the city folk as well. That's actually one of the questions that we are asking people about. We've sort of tried to include neighborhoods and people who don't live in, include non-NAS neighborhoods and people who don't live in the NAS neighborhoods as part of our review, because we think that they have perspectives that are valuable as well. And also NAS is something that is known across the city. And people who participate in their communities have lots of questions about what the NAS is, how do you get involved, and what resources and opportunities it offers, and whether or not those things could be relevant or valuable to their own community work. And so we are including voices from outside of the NAS neighborhoods in our information gathering. So it's a question for us right now, and whether or not it's going towards something that is more transferable to other neighborhoods, I think is something that at least we don't know yet, and perhaps you want to weigh in on this.
Vicki?
Well, thank you. Through the chair, really great question. We feel that the findings from this will inform us on not only how to work with the existing neighborhoods, but to expand it to other areas. At the same time, we are, under Grace's leadership, as you know, we brought a report about hubs. And the whole concept of hubs and surrounding staff around a community and their needs is really somewhat similar in some ways to this concept. So it's marrying the strong citizen engagement component, and we really value that very much, to the sort of the hub component. And so right now, Grace is providing leadership in both, because we want to learn from this experience and then come back with a report as well in terms of how these two things will work together. At the same time, we're going through a change with Ontario Works, with housing, with childcare. Our philosophy is no wrong door. And again, what we're talking about is let's get out there in the community and surround ourselves around areas where there have been identified issues or needs, and obviously in collaboration with the rest of the departments. So we think the opportunity is right. We think that we learn from what the Reimagined tells us. We apply it to where we think the direction we would like to see. We're also very attentive to the whole community engagement spearheaded on the future directions, where we had over 50,000 people involved. So there's really a need to bring this all together. So that's why we're saying by Q2, we will come back with how and what way we think we can apply this. But absolutely, the concept, like I know a few you have said, how and what way do we engage citizens in a meaningful way and have them take ownership of their issues is absolutely going to be a critical component of it.
I appreciate that. And I think the other point, I don't know if it's going to be addressed through this, but often organizations can become echo chambers for like-minded individuals, meaning that others feel disenfranchised from participation. Is that kind of strategy and issue going to be addressed through this Reimagining the Neighborhood Action Strategy?
I think, I know there's an attempt to doing that. I mean, that's a big challenge, and we heard it again, too, from the various neighborhoods. How do you engage with people who don't commonly come out to meetings? And I know in Ralston, that's been a big challenge, as I've seen, too. We have seen a growing number coming out, but it's still pretty white. Let's put it that way. And so how do you engage with people? How do you get the message out? So finding creative ways to do that and engaging with them. The kitchen, for example, at Neighbor to Neighbor, on a Thursday evening. Last Thursday I was there and there was about 80 people eating there. This is an opportunity. I walk around, talk to people, get a little bit of more input for even reimagine. And so this is one way I think that engagement can come. But I think we need to look for and find opportunities to do that in an effective way.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Al.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. No further questions, hearing none. Thank you very much for your time, folks. And Mr. Fletcher, I believe the floor is yours to wrap this up, and I look forward to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's the end of the formal presentation, so I'm just wondering if you wanted to do a motion to accept the presentations before we talk about the staff report.
We will after you wrap up.
Thank you. So before council is a staff report with 3 recommendations. These recommendations relate to a transition period for community development. So as you heard, the community consultations are ending in December, and through 2018 becomes a bit of a transitional period to maintain community development within the neighborhoods and support the neighborhoods while we implement the next version of NAS with recommendations coming in June of 2018. As part of that, we've looked at an equal funding partnership between Hamilton Community Foundation and ourselves, and that is recommendation B. Recommendation C relates to something that you heard about today, which was about the Neighborhood Leadership Institute, and a great program that is led by Hamilton Community Foundation and supported by the city, where residents are taken through a program to build capacity and abilities to implement new projects and opportunities within the city and build leadership skills and help fine-tune how to make those projects successful. So similar to other years where we provided funding, we'd like to continue that funding. The last relates to Neighborhood Engagement Matching Grant Program. So each of the 11 NAS neighborhoods has a small grant amount that's provided to each of those neighborhoods where they can draw from for engagement activities. The $10,000 relates to a fund or a grant that council approved on a pilot program, which really is essentially for outside of NAS neighborhoods to allow resident engagement activity to have $500 to $1,000 towards engagement activities similar to what would be done in a NAS neighborhood. The funding for these 3 recommendations comes from the capital fund, as noted in the report. So it's not asking for additional money, but permission to spend the money that we already have. So in closing, I'd like to thank the residents who were there to support and present today, those residents who are not here, and the hundreds of residents that provide uncountable volunteer hours in their community for the engagement activities they do. The partnership that we have with the Hamilton Community Foundation in supporting this activity and moving it forward through the leadership of the Reimagine team as well, and thank you to them. And also to Social Planning and Research Council and the CDs, past and present, that have brought the neighborhoods to where they are today through that grassroots engagement that has developed and nourished the planning teams that are out there. So I will leave it at that, and thank you to council for your vision on allowing us to do this and to continue to do this work within our neighborhoods. It's a very exciting opportunity for us. So thank you, and welcome any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Fletcher. Before we go to questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move a motion to receive the presentations. Moved by Farr, second by Jackson. All in favor? Carried. Now let's put the report on the floor. Moved by Skelly, seconded by Farr. Now we have a speakers list on the report, and we have Councillors Whitehead and Farr. Councillor Whitehead, the floor is yours.
Thank you, appreciate it. So I don't even know where to start. Can you give me an idea when you talk about the leadership? Because I've heard various points of view in regards to the leadership program. What is the core focus of the leadership program?
So through the chair to the councillor, quite simply, it's where two residents from in the city, anywhere across the city, partner up on a project or an idea or an initiative, whereby through taking the Neighbourhood Leadership Institute course, they learn about some of the project management, some leadership skills, the opportunities that exist to further that project, to develop a concept, whatever it may be. For example, Beautiful Alleys through Brenda Duke was a concept, and she went through the Neighbourhood Leadership Institute and helped her coordinate and focus that a little bit more, and now it's grown to a great success in Gala and spread beyond those neighborhoods. So it's just the opportunity to build capacity to better their projects.
So help me understand in the context of a neighborhood association. I don't have the time to take the leadership program. I'm a resident that is really driven to be participating in the process. Can I actually, because I didn't take the leadership program, be isolated from participation?
Through the chair, absolutely not. It's just an opportunity to build capacity, and residents who choose that path and want to learn more about improving their projects. The planning teams are made up of many residents who have not been through neighborhood leadership team or program, and then there's other residents that have been part of it. And the engagement that happens within the community, some of that is done outside of the planning teams as well. So there's no direct relationship, but it is an opportunity to build capacity for those who want to explore that opportunity.
I appreciate the clarification. So who actually teaches the leadership?
So it's a partnership between Hamilton Community Foundation, Mohawk College, and McMaster? Not McMaster. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, just clarification. So Mohawk College, Hamilton Community Foundation, and in partnership with the City of Hamilton, operate the course.
Okay, appreciate that clarification. In this report, we're going through a transition because we had the Social Planning Research Council that did outstanding work. There's a transition going on. I noticed in this report that contracts will be picked up by the Community Foundation. So help me understand. So nothing's really changed structurally, except from a governance point of view, there'll be just the foundation taking over that role versus the Social Planning Research Council. But the same contract, same people would be continuing. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Farr.
Al thanked who I was going to thank. I wanted to move the recommendations, but I'm fine seconding them. Wanted to also take a moment.
Okay,
No, it's okay. No, it's okay.
No, I'll accept that.
No, that's why it doesn't matter who moves.
No, Councillor Farr, I'll accept you as moving the recommendation.
That's why I had
Seconded
indicated
by
earlier, but it's not an issue.
Councillor Skelly.
Okay, thank you, Don.
You're
Thank you, Councillor Skelly. And I've been to grads before with the Neighbourhood Leadership Institute. It's fantastic stuff. The people who graduate, the graduation ceremony, they're very proud of their achievements, and we are proud of them. And they have gone on. Just one example. There are other examples. Lighting Up Ward 4 is another great initiative that stemmed from the Leadership Institute. So I just want to say that this is all fantastic stuff. We continue to nurture and work well with our good friends at the Community Foundation, Mohawk College, the library. There are so many partners, but what's best is it's been a success. We are reimagining ourselves, and it will be a success to a much greater extent. So I would only suggest that we don't come back to emergency community services in Q2, as indicated earlier. Mr. Chairman, I would suggest it once again returns to GIC, because I do believe that that report will encompass planning issues, public works issues, public health issues, and many more. So to have all of us at the horseshoe would be both symbolic and I think prudent. So thank you very much, all of you, especially the residents who are still hanging around and not jumping on the free buffet like I'm about to, because I believe you're ready to call it a day or a night at this point, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Councillor Farr. We now have Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and through you too, Al. Al, so I just want to be clear on the dollars here. If I add up the amounts in B, C, and D, that equals about $176,000. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you were talking about the partnership, Al, with the HCF. So do I split that 176 in half as a 50-50, or help me understand how that financial partnership is working, Mr. Chairman, through you, please?
Thank you. Through the chair to the councillor. So the items C and D are separate from the community development. Community development relates to the B option. So roughly, the approximation is for the transition period through 2018, it's roughly $300,000. So the B option in there shows you about $146,000 in those recommendations.
Correct.
And that would be 50% roughly of the cost of the 2018 transition period.
Oh, so our 146, which is city funds, you would double that to make it the 50-50, so that would be like 292 then, if you will, Al?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay then. Is that reflected in the report throughout? If it isn't, I would just say for the record, let's make sure that that entire amount, and thank you to the HCF, in the partnerships that they often do with the City of Hamilton and throughout the community. But I would just humbly suggest let's make sure that's reflected throughout, and continue on with the momentum and success of the program. Mr. Chairman, I just want to conclude by saying, since I've been elected, NAS has taken on a new version, a new form of, and it's been grassroots driven up, if you will. But I just want to say for the record, I've been very, very proud of the fact, since I've been here since late 80s, early 90s, I've always enjoyed the, I'll call it the traditional form of citizen engagement, where I regularly used to call town hall meetings, neighborhood type meetings, get people to come out, and from there have them sign up to form a citizens volunteer committee, working what I call in a tri-party arrangement between my office, city staff, and the citizens that wanted to serve on a committee to, whether it was a task force, whether it was a long-term project, a park redevelopment of an old school site, traffic calming, neighborhood upgrades, whatever the issue was. I've always enjoyed citizen engagement, always promoted it, advocated for it, and I'm glad in terms of some parts of the city that potentially didn't necessarily have that type of initiative, if you will, from higher up. I'm glad with this grassroots initiative, and I was a supporter when the city manager, I believe, brought Paul Johnson on board about 6-7 years ago with the original $2 million investment to help neighborhoods thrive and to enjoy and flourish all the benefits that the local government has to offer as well. So it's almost been like a companion thing, a new thing, but any form of citizen engagement is something that I've always supported. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
And just for the record, I have town hall meetings too. It's over and above, but okay, Councillor Whitehead, Councillor Green, and then Councillor Whitehead for a second time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I really feel the need that of all the thanks and kudos that have gone out, I was remiss earlier in not acknowledging the incredible work of Suzanne Brown, who under any other circumstance would have been here, but for her transition to McMaster, and certainly was the spearhead from the time that I remember in starting here at the city side. And I think it's important to acknowledge her and her tremendous work, and also I'll acknowledge the loss that we had to McMaster. So if McMaster's listening, stop poaching our good people. Thank you.
Moving on to Councillor Whitehead.
In fact, it's good synergy here because she originally came from the Social Planning Research Council. So I want to give that, because that's my question. I'm trying to understand what's changed. If we've taken Social Planning Research Council out, but we're providing the same contracts, we're just shifting those contracts over to the Community Foundation, what problem are we solving? Or trying to solve?
Yeah, through the chair of the councillor. So it's not a complicated thing in that Hamilton Community Foundation is a partner with us in the funding of community development. A contract with Social Planning and Research Council, if we were to extend that into 2018, we would have tied the hands of the residents as to a binding contract through 2018. By ending that contract, we're not tying the residents to any preconceived notion of where we're going forward with community development and opening the door to something new. It's my understanding the Hamilton Community Foundation doesn't intend to retain the community developers beyond the 1 year. This is a transitional opportunity, maintain the status quo with the developers, community developers, provide that support, and through the next year, try some new things of the way to engage residents, both from a community developer point of view and then where we as city staff can do that as well. So it was just a way of not tying the hands or any preconceived notions to the residents of a outcome for community development in the future.
I appreciate the clarification. Again, I want to put emphasis behind the Social Planning Research Council and all the incredible work they do. And the fact that this is happening, I thought I'd better highlight and try to understand why we're doing it in this way. Now you've clarified it. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn, moved by Farr, seconded by Green. All in favor, carried.